Indeed. So that's enough announcements and books and items of interest. I'm going to invite Philip Beanland up to the microphone. Now, that's for the people in the room, and then you're wired for sound for the people who are not in the room. Sure. Rather than introduce Phil, I'm going to ask him a couple of questions, and he's going to introduce himself. So first of all, welcome, and it's a thrill to have you here. We appreciate you being here.
Thank you very much.
So the first question in This Is Your Life is, where were you born and where did you grow up?
Okay, so born in Box Hill and in Victoria, so and grew up in Glen Waverley, but I am a bit privileged to have had a little bit of my growing up in England as well. While my dad did his Masters and PhD over there, so predominantly Glen Waverley.
Okay, excellent. So a local Melbourne.
But I think Victoria. I'm still growing up. So.
Okay, now into the Air Force. Obviously, you joined the Air Force. What was your first posting? And as we said, you can answer that any way you like.
Yeah, I think I'll answer it as first posting post training was into F-111s. So I went into 1 squadron after being 6 squadron through a conversion course, but that was my first posting to an operational unit.
Excellent, excellent. And then prior to this posting, what was your favourite posting?
Oh boy. Look, I always wanted to go overseas and serve. And it was my time at 36 Squadron, flying the mighty H, whistles there, that I got to serve overseas. And I think every RAF pilot and aircrew that serves wants to serve operationally. And I got my chance to do that.
Excellent, thanks. And then the last question before I hand over and we make sure that we're sharing the screens and everything. Do you have any, we know that you're famous because you're here tonight, but do you have any famous relatives?
Oh, okay. I have a couple probably. A few people have already come up to me tonight and said, are you a relative of Professor Beanland? And yes, I am. I'm his son, his younger son. And he was the Vice Chancellor of RMIT, if that rings any bells with people. So a very big Melbourne connection in education, and still he's enjoying retirement.
Excellent. Okay, so I'm going to, so thank you for that. It's nice to learn a little bit about our speaker. I'm going to hand over to Phil, and I'm just going to make sure that we're sharing the slides and that that's all working.
Right.
And we'll have to make sure that we can see the slides in the room as well.
Is it possible to go back to the start?
Yes, yes, we will do that.
That's a pretty slide, that one.
Which one do I choose?
Sharing screen, that one. And then share. And then...
Fantastic.
We're in your hands.
Okay, thank you very much. And look, it is a privilege to be here tonight to address you fine folk and the people online as well. Hopefully everyone can hear me well enough. I'll say that.
Yes.
Having multiple years in aviation, I know what that can do to you with the deafness idea. So look, I will be presenting on 100 Squadron. 100 Squadron is a reformed squadron, and our role today is the Air Force Heritage Squadron, and our motto is then, now, always. We liked the centenary motto so much, we pinched it as a unit motto. Yeah, and as I said, Wing Commander Philip Beanland, I'm the commanding officer of the squadron, and it's an absolute privilege to be here and address you. I'll take questions as we go. So, you know, interactive as much as possible. If you have a question, just raise your hand and jump in. I'll take the next slide, thanks. So I'll begin by giving you a little bit of background of how we set up the squadron, where it's come from, the heritage fleet and disposition, the reformation of the squadron and its history, its organisational structure and composition. It's our vision and mission, the way we see our role. There's some of the challenges of standing up a squadron in short order and operating a squadron of this disparate fleet and the people within it. I'll talk about our roles and our future plans. And as I said, please ask any questions. But the next slide very much talks to our fleet visually. As I look around the room here, you've got a lot of photos of the fleet. And it is a great snapshot of a history of Royal Australian Air Force aviation. There is one aircraft in there, and I know there's a couple of plane spotters in the room that never served in the Royal Australian Air Force. Can someone maybe pick that one out? The Dragonfly. But why do you think we have a Dragonfly in our fleet? Yeah, it's good fun. I love that answer. Served in Vietnam. And additionally, we had people, including the commander of Air Force Training Group, serve on T-37s. So there is RAF pilots that have done exchanges. Now that's obviously not a T variant with all those things hanging off it, but it is an aircraft that we're proud to have in our fleet. So
T6 didn't serve in the RAF either.
No, but it had a massive connection, didn't it, with what's going
True.
Yeah, absolutely. Just about every pilot that jumped into a V12 and many other aircraft went through the Harvard in that time frame, and it's very much a pivotal aircraft as the pilot maker, as it was back in its day, and it still is today. So it has a really important role of a stepping stone into greater horsepower airplanes that are 600 horsepower plus, as it did back then with the tail wheel. So as you can see, the fleet up there, it ranges from ragwing aircraft right through pistons and medium weight pistons and twins, and then into the jet fleet as well. The fleet up there, deliberately I have put it up there, is the origins from the Temora Aviation Museum, and the next slide will talk about that. And also the RAF base Point Cook. Now, firstly, I'd like to thank those people that presented an array of aircraft into 100 Squadron's hands. That doesn't happen overnight, and it doesn't happen without immense hard work to assemble a fleet like this. So we view ourselves as the custodians of this fleet, and we're very proud to be the custodians of this fleet. And we take great care in continuing their display role from a owner and operator in the eyes of CASA. That's what I am as the commanding officer. So I hold that very near and dear to continue this this role and preserve. If I'm preserving the asset, I'm looking after the people. If I'm looking after the people, I'm looking after the assets. And we look at it that way. So this slide here, I think you all know where Temora is. So it was actually for our Battle of Britain memorial flight friends that I had to remind them that Australia is a pretty big continent, and we're just two locations that are separated by 550 kilometres apart. We're headquartered in Point Cook, and the RAF Museum fleet that inherited and became 100 Squadron at Point Cook. I'd like to thank everyone in the RAF Museum for their work of collecting that collection. At Temora, that fleet, if you were following the 11 aircraft out of the 12 that's on that list, so the first 11 were gifted in July 2019 from Temora Aviation Museum to the Commonwealth. And when the squadron stood up on the 1st of January 2021, they transferred across into the into 100 Squadron. So that's how the fleet was basically put together. 2 museums to summarise, transferred, and very much we remain a flying museum is one way to look at it. But our role is to display airworthy aircraft. I have cheekily put a Kitty Hawk P40 in acquisition. I can't talk too much about that, but that is something that's going on, and as financial years come to a close, it was an opportunity to go out and buy a Kitty Hawk. So that's about all I want to say about that at the moment. But we're very pleased that we'll be able to represent such an important aircraft in Australia's history in the Southwest Pacific and other locations, but have it within the fleet. So we'll go to the next slide.
Before you go.
Oh, sure. Questions. Great.
English Electric Canberra.
Yep.
Not British Electric.
You're watching the news?
No, yeah, so
I'm attending a Zoom meeting.
we're using that name because it is a British Electra. It is a TT variant. It's not an Australian variant. It's painted like 2 Squadron, but we're using that name that's out of the flight manual.
I'm not going to stick with
That
this.
is
I've
what's
got
in
the
the flight
message
manual.
here.
Yeah.
I'll come out in about 5 minutes or more.
Online, it's an English Electric Canberra, not a British.
Has the Kitty Hawk flown?
Is it airworthy?
This Kitty Hawk that we're buying is an airworthy Kitty Hawk. So you might be thinking of another Kitty Hawk, and I'll just, I don't want to talk too much about that one because it's still a work in progress. So the one that we're acquiring is very much an airworthy Kitty Hawk. Okay. There's some reasons why I have to be a little bit cagey about that one. Okay. No worries. All right. Any other questions on that slide of fleet disposition, aircraft, spelling? No.
Yes, Warwick from Brisbane. It's an English Electric Canberra, not British Electric Canberra.
You're saying it's an English electric.
Yeah, we just explained that.
Yeah.
It was built by a different company.
Yeah. I might have paraphrased that incorrectly, actually. English. Yeah.
It was built
Oh,
by
yes.
Short. It was
Oh,
built
okay.
by Short.
Yeah. Yeah, it is electric, not Electra. Thank you. Yeah. Righto. I'll take that and critique it. Thank you.
Yeah.
Next slide. Okay, so I talked about where the 2 fleets came from, and this slide just talks about, probably telling you nothing you didn't know. RAF Museum established in 52, heritage flight operations from about the 80s, and we picked up that fleet and continue today with that fleet. And the Tomora Aviation Museum, established in 1999, obviously still going as a Tomora Aviation Museum. Nothing has changed apart from the 11 aircraft gifted to the Commonwealth. So we house them at Tomora, we display them at Tomora and other locations as well. But every time we do display a Tomora, an aircraft that's housed at the Tomora Aviation Museum, we utilise Tomora historic flight personnel, which are squadron personnel. And I'll talk about that a little bit more in a moment. So how did it begin? 100 Squadron as a flying squadron in the reformed state was the brainchild of the Chief of Air Force back in 2015, and that was Jeff Brown. And he wrote this paper, the occasional paper of 2015, and it also was, I'm sure you've had this talked about by Group Captain Friedrichs or others, or the Director of History and Heritage Branch, but it formed the nucleus and the need to have a History and Heritage Branch. One of the other things it talked about was having an Air Force Heritage Squadron. And it was the idea that the Heritage Squadron looked and felt as much as possible like a mainstream squadron. And there's some importance to that, because we plug into the rest of Air Force. Actually looking more like it makes it easier to run and integrate with the effects and be tasked. So it also brings us under the full governance of what a commanding officer powers within a squadron stands up. So I'm sure a lot of people understand what that means to personnel. It means that you very much are focused on that task. We don't have to go out and collect. We don't have to go out and be a public-facing museum. our task is to display heritage aircraft. All right. I talked about in July 2019 the gifting of the fleet, and we're very grateful to David Lowy for his vision and also the Temora Aviation Museum. And we are strategic partners with the Temora Aviation Museum now. I speak regularly with the CEO, Murray Keir, and Deputy CEO, Peter Harper, regularly. We're up there regularly. I was up there last weekend with the showcase, and we are very much embedded, and they are embedded in cross-pollinating our work together. They're part of our team and we're part of theirs. In June 2020, there was a safety review on the RAF Museum, which unfortunately pointed out some things that needed to be addressed. And it pointed to culture, facilities and work health and safety areas that needed some improvement. And that's about all I want to touch about. That's a bit of a touchy subject, so we'll just leave it at that. There was room for improvement. In November 2020, the Chief of Air Force endorsed an AFOD, which is the Air Force Organisational Diagram and Directive. And that really turns on the resources to stand up a squadron. I realise now how important that document is, because it turns on funded positions, it turns on funding streams, it turns on resources. It allows us to justify our existence with all of big defence and all of the supporting agencies. I've learnt a lot about the behind the scenes wheels when you stand up a squadron and basically generate things from scratch in lots of areas. At that time, the decision of the Chief of Air Force 100% agreed with the divesting of the RAF Museum from the Air Force Training Group and put that into the History and Heritage branch. And I know you've had Wing Commander Matt Shelley speak to you, and he would have explained that process. It was about August 2020 that I got notified that I was going to be the commanding officer of 100 Squadron. I was the executive officer at the Air Academy, which is the former Air Training Wing, headquarters at East Sale, and had the RAF Museum in its command and control. At that stage, AFTG were managing the Temora project, as it called it, and it wasn't being managed at the Air A level and below, the Air Academy, or at the RAF Museum. It was very much plugging straight in to a one-star headquarters, so Air Force Training Group. On the 1st of January, that's when 100 Squadron was reformed. It got announced by the Deputy Prime Minister in a ministerial advice that I might have helped write, and media stand up. He also is was the member for the Riverina, and that was a reason why it was announced that way. The 10th of January in 2021 was the first day of work effectively. Everyone's reassembling, well, what people had been posted in at that stage. And that's when our tasking really, the tasks in front of us materialised. So as you probably well know, 100 Squadron is a wartime squadron. Its origins and naming convention were basically borrowed out of the RAF squadron that got decimated through Singapore in World War II. They were in Australia at the time. They were back in the eastern side of Australia, and the decision was to equip 100 Squadron, make it a Royal Australian Air Force unit with a British commanding officer, so John Barmer, and equip it with the DAP Beaufort and get up north, get in it, get amongst it. So, and you probably know how that they were the first operational unit in the theatre, and they really led the way of using the DAP Beaufort, of which, you know, very proud that Australia built 700 of those wonderful aircraft and did an amazing job. And the story, the Song of the Beaufort book, is a wonderful depiction of 100 Squadron's efforts from 42 through to 46. In 46, it was disbanded like a lot of other squadrons. And I'll tell you a funny little story, I guess. They borrowed the squadron badge of the RAF, which is a skull and crossbones. And they never ratified that badge as you would ratify a unit badge. I think they were a little busy because they went straight to war. So that badge is not a ratified badge in the Royal Australian Air Force construct. So we are without a unit patch at the moment. So we're probably one of the only units operating without a unit crest. And hence you would have seen why we're using the 100 Squadron, borrowed, if you like, from the centenary, but that is our unit badge rather than crest. And that is the badge that we wear on our uniform. And that is our identity that we're creating, the red Spitfire on the blue badge with the yellow writing. Okay, next slide, thanks. Oh, it's frozen, has it?
Oh, I think another window was active.
Okay, so yeah, so I've talked really about a little bit of that transition. It was very much a transition to transfer the organisation out of a museum and put it in a squadron construct at Point Cook. We had to basically integrate additional resources because we were plugging more people in, and we really started to turn on a good financial stream. And a lot of people at that point said, boy, that's a fair bit of money to be spending on a thing for 1 year. So what do you mean it's for 1 year? We're not stood up just to service the centenary year of Air Force. We're enduring. And that's probably the biggest message I do want to get across, is you don't just stand up a squadron for 1 year. The amount of effort to stand up a squadron is disproportional. You could have done it and created an effect so many other ways and stand up a squadron for 1 year. We're enduring and we're going to stay. And that's definitely the message I want to get out. Like anything of going through change, this is a management of change, and it had a management of change complexity on steroids. So it was very much my job to get out there and plan, communicate and engage the whole team and bring it all together. My immediate focus was has a bit of a safety focus, and you probably saw some reasons for that, what I previously mentioned. So setting the conditions to safely commence operations with sufficient resources, drive cultural reform, unite two teams at Point Cook and Temora. And a bit of a cheeky line, the next one. Yep, straight out of the gun, we're into the centenary year with very few months to get ready for that. And I'm very proud that 100 Squadron featured in our mass fly past at Canberra on the 31st of March, and we led that formation. So I'm very proud of the team's contribution, the amount of effort to get those particular aircraft up. I would have loved to have had more of our fleet up, but as I'll explain, there is some challenges across our fleet. And actually, one of our first events that we did do was up at Temora on the 6th, 7th of March, which was the Temora Air Force Centenary Showcase. And that went off very well as well. And 100 Squadron participated in the RAF memorial dedication on the 30th, and then the fly past on the 31st. And we had many other display commitments through 2021 as COVID permitted. A lot of things were cancelled in that year. And what we've actually found is a lot of the air shows, we've had 9 air shows this year, or major air show showcase displays this year. And a lot of those were from things that were postponed from 2021. Our next one's a bit of an eye chart, but it wouldn't be a RAF presentation without an org chart. So look, I'll quickly explain it. It basically explains a command structure. So we are a traditional unit with a commanding officer. I have a 2IC being the XO, which is directly below me, who's also our unit aviation safety officer. Off to the other side of that is a deputy unit aviation safety officer as a reservist. I have unit safety advisors in the E9 warrant officer stream, and a deputy underneath him. I have, and just understanding Temora Aviation Museum engineering, and that's that blue box, is the engineering effects that's on contract to provide and look after, care and feed all of the aircraft that are up at Temora. Okay, so that's a contract, and they are civilians. They are not defence members on that engineering team. So I have a Temora liaison officer who is a warrant officer, our squadron warrant officer, who's double-hatted, does the squadron warrant officer job and the Temora liaison officer that interfaces at an engineering level with that team and the chief engineer. Off to the side, I have a senior liaison officer. Little bit unusual is that member is a 1-star. So I have a 1-star reporting and interfacing in with a wing commander, but he's interface. There's a reason, and it's a little bit of a hangover of the transition as well, is that he was basically the OIC while this organisation was in transition. And when 100 Squadron has stood up, he nests under us now. And then under the flatter structure there, basically the far left has a Temora flight commander. That's the one in orange on the far left. And under him is a term SCO. Anyone know what that means in the room? A SCO, a Specialist Capability Officer. Right, so Specialist Capability Officers, there's nothing new about that. They've actually been around for a while. Mainly they've been used in the medical or legal world for RAF to inject civilians and not put them through full officer training, maybe give them a knife and fork course, very abbreviated, and bring them in as a capability because they fulfill a unique capability that Air Force doesn't have internally. Our SCOs in our squadron are civilian warbird experts. So I'll say that, civilian warbird experts who now have become defence members and flight lieutenants. So I've got a wide ranging of ages and capabilities and backgrounds. Some of them are incredibly wealthy and well-travelled people around the world. And some of them are businessmen, some of them are airline pilots, some of them are agricultural experts and own agricultural business of air agriculture. I'm talking about spraying. A lot of them are lamies and have a background in aircraft maintenance as well. Lots of these people own their own aircraft. So it is a wonderful tapestry in the human domain there of people that make up the squadron. There's one particular gentleman there, over 300,000 tailwheel landings, 32,000 hours of tailwheel flying. And that's, you know, way more than I have, right? I have a measly amount compared to that. So I draw upon that knowledge that they have, and it's very welcomed. And then below that, I have the most unusual component of a squadron is a star ranking ex CDF, ex air commander. So 2 stars and a 4-star in that star ranking area. So wonderful gentleman who basically do this for the love of it and love continuing to fly the aircraft at tomorrow. Next to that box is the Point Cook flight. And so I will say that I glossed a little bit over the flight commander. The flight commander is a reserve squadron leader, RAF pilot. So if you look at that flight, it's very much his job is to be that interface between from my direction through the XO to the flight commander and organises the flight very much on a day-to-day basis. The same thing happens at Point Cook using a reservist on a fair rate of effort, who just happens to be an airline pilot as well, and a few other jobs off to the side. And he administers the reserve element of the Point Cook flight. No SCOs in the Point Cook flight structure, but just reserve pilots. And most of those pilots have come through, a display background and predominantly a low-level display background, but not all. Then the next box across is PCO or admino, that you might know that, and the admin team below. Very critical because a lot of the people on the far left just don't have DRN access. And if you know what a DPN, a defence network computing, so we do all the admin for them, if you like. And you might go, wow, that's great. They just turn up and fly. It's like a bit of nirvana, really. And we do a lot of the admin, booking travel, accommodation, allowances, the works, look after all of that side of them. So we're one of the few units that has a very traditional admin structure embedded in it to look after and care and feed for our people. Next of that is a logistics area with a logistics officer over the top of it, and very much APS and supply trade junior ranks to really buy and procure all these wonderful artefacts that we've got. And we have the most unique purchasing system of any RAF unit, buying very off non-traditional pathways, let's just call it that way. Beside that is an OPSO, and at the moment I'm lucky I've got a pilot in that position, but at the end of the year that'll transition out to an operations officer stream. That is the, so we're welcome having an OPSO to help be that central nervous system of operations and do a lot of the pre-planning and putting together a lot of the artefacts that we need to satisfy CASA's display requirements in public places of flying limited category aircraft over them. To the right of that is one of the key linchpins of this squadron, and that is my senior engineering officer, a squadron leader, huge background in defence, but knows warbirds extremely well, and is LAME qualified himself. So a bit of a unicorn find of actually finding an engineering officer that understands the CASA regulatory system and what CAR 30 means, rather than be able to spell it and not know all of what that means. So we run 2 CAR 30 outfits, one at Temora and one at Point Cook. And we're very pleased to say that we've just updated our procedures manual for Point Cook. It's 180 pages of how to run a CAR 30 shed. And CASA just said, wow, it's one of the best CAR 30 manuals when they reissued our CAR 30 certificate. So we've really taken a really massive step forward in modernising our compliance with CASA in the technical space. And that's mainly up to the Senjo's good work there of doing that. We also look after our continuing airworthiness of our entire fleet. And that's no small task, and probably turns him grey rapidly, as it does for me. Under our workforce there is very much our Point Cook technical workforce, of which needs to grow. It's a little bit out of shape. as our fleet expands and as we do more tasking away from Point Cook. So we've got a blended workforce of APS. We've got 2 APS lamies. One of them was ex-defence. And we've got under that structure, we've got a couple of full-time junior technicians, both black-hander and white-hander, and then we've got reservists. So you can see we're pretty thin on the ground for the effect that we create. Totally. All right. Go to the next slide. Tasks. I won't bang on about this too much, but I've already mentioned that we're August, I got notified, set up a Tiger team. That was a small team, and took a deep breath and going, oh, wow, how do we make all this work? By 1 January, write all the OIP, establish a command presence, really have the exemplar of professionalism up front, get contemporary as we can, empower a team, identify all the people we need, map it into the organisational structure and fill it. Define roles and responsibilities, write duty statements, the works. The biggest thing we had to do, and that was on the safety side of the house, was write our aviation safety management system. And we're the first RAF unit to actually write an ASMS manual that's fully compliant with CASA and DASA. There's no other RAF unit that has a manual, and we've got a manual. We're very proud of it, and we use it every day. We're opening and having a look at how we do something. As very much an active part of what we do, and we've submitted that to CASA as well, and they've looked over it and think it's great. Also have our WHS safety management system as well. We're trying to look at integrating that. At the moment, Defence doesn't integrate those two. I see a future improve that we could do that. It has a big bent on risk management, because it has to. We're obliged to under the WHS Act and the way we do aviation risk management. But it's also, I think out of that, what I've learned is it's about identifying, knowing, we're not shying away from our hazards. We know we've got plenty of them, but it's embracing that and putting realistic controls in place and monitoring their effectiveness. And then we've done our job. We conduct the exercises as safely as we can. And there's also a drive for constant improvement and learning, a learning culture. Drafting the OIP of the squadron, orders, instructions, procedures. Risk management, I sort of touched on that. Implementing and monitoring the effectiveness and controls. One of the tasks we had to do at Point Cook was clean and remediate our facility. The bellmans that were up, and the northern 2 bellmans at Point Cook, and you may be very familiar with those, they were a bit of a disaster when we inherited them. And we basically needed to do an industrial clean from top to bottom. And I mean beams that had never been cleaned on the top. So we knocked off over 70 years of dust and bird debris and made that workplace 100% compliant and remediated those facilities. We've removed 2,000 square metres of asbestos out of the flooring material, ground our floors flat, epoxy, reconcreted them and levelled them and painted them with epoxy paint. We've had flaking lead-based paint. We've chipped off as much as of that we can, sprayed a containing device over it before those facilities can get further remediated, and that will mean the cladding will come off the hangars and they'll be reclad on the outside. We've sourced and identified the funding for that and the plans, and we have that fully funded now, and we're in design right now to improve our facilities at Point Cook. Really, I kind of like to say that to stand up this squadron and draft the amount of briefing that goes up through our command chain, that most of it fell on the squadron and on my shoulders to put this up. We all of these things and our own action and sponsor, what they call sponsor managed, sponsor funded, happened because we were managing it at a unit level and we were crashing through timelines. And just recently on the 28th of last month, we held a thank you dinner in our hangars. And we couldn't have done that without the work of everyone we invited into the hangars. And we invited 130 people. We invited nearly 200, but 130 turned up. And they were well fed in our hangars, and appreciated a nice evening of us saying a very big heartfelt appreciation of their efforts, because it was a big team effort to restore those hangars back into an operational state and get it working. We got the Point Cook flight back up and running by the 18th of February, which is impressive because that was a grounded flight at that stage. It had been grounded, and we had to prepare for an airworthiness board that happened on the 24th of March that year. So now squadron's only been stood up for a couple of months, and we're facing one of the more challenging things of getting through our airworthiness authority, that we've got a structure in place to go flying and do it safely. And we had a fairly busy exercise or fly past display schedule to meet as well. So I'll go to the next slide. The next slide really articulates what we do and really why we do it. So you can read that. I hope that draws my workforce together and focuses them on what we're trying to achieve, and everyone in our team take them on that journey. I'll go next slide, thank you. I really put out a bit of a vision. I guess it was a little bit cheeky, but you've got to be cheeky with a vision. You've got to put it out there. I still hold that we can be a premier display squadron and bring a professional standard, and we're trusted. And we will honour and inspire those that come to see it. I put in the 2021 focus there because I was really trying to link in our motto with that first year. And it is an enduring thing of then, now, always. It's got a flavour in the squadron. We represent the then, we're doing it now, and we want to preserve these things for always. So I think there is those three elements in our motto. And it very much trying to tie it in with what we're doing in our centennial year. Go to the next slide. I'll go very quickly here through this because I'm cognizant I've probably spoken for a while. Leading and management of change, as I kind of spoke about, a unit focus definitely in 2021 was establish, stabilise and improve. And really from 2022 onwards, I can see it as consolidating, execute and evaluate how we're going, and then do something about it if there's room for improvement. Cultural reset, as I mentioned, not everyone wants to change a culture, so that can be a challenge. It's about communicating it and seeing, getting people invested to why things needed to change. Building understanding of fleet airworthiness, that's probably one for my understanding. The hidden complexities behind the scene of all of our airworthiness challenges. Overcoming inertia of the security and estate group. And I mean that with all good spirit. They've got a massive job. I'll give you an example. There's over 8,000 EIRs or estate infrastructure requests in the system right now. We put one in. It just happened to be that our one might have floated up near the top and got processed fairly quickly. I don't know how that happens, but look, it's great that it does. But there is quite a backlog, and Point Cook being old infrastructure is a bit of a challenge. So it got some attention pretty quickly. Building collective understanding of the warbird operations through our layers of our chain of command, internal defence. Even though we've operated a lot of these aircraft internally over the past, those people have moved on. We have new people in that all they know is a modern airworthiness system and of certified aircraft with certified aviation product going onto them. And we're not kind of like that. We're very unique that we're a special certificate of airworthiness aircraft operating in a limited category with some aviation product that some of it doesn't get made anymore. Or these days with the rise of CAC and CAD, we can make parts and those parts might be coming from a non-certified manufacturer, but we can make parts safely that are strong, get them tested. Educating our team on the power of risk management, that's been a challenge and it continues to be a challenge without being called risk averse, but actually using risk for your own force of goodness. And that's the way we've done it. If we don't have resources, we go out and we chase them. And making risk-based decisions, understanding the hidden complexities of event management. There is a lot in that space and we do a fair bit of that. And strengthen our relationship, as I said, with our strategic partner at Temora. We've had our challenges as any two organisations coming together and we've got over that birthing difficulty and now we're working together very closely. We have extant challenges. Our regulatory framework, where, as I said, we're regulated under CASA because we're VH registered aircraft, our whole fleet. CASA source or outsource a lot of that responsibility to AWOL, Australian Warbirds Aircraft Limited, the self-administering organisation, and they perform a lot of that role for the regulator. And then we have our own defence regulations that are authorised under the Defence Aviation Safety Authority, DASA. So you can see a kind of, whenever you fit in two bosses or two regulatory frameworks, you can see that there's challenges in there. And I'm not going to go into all the detail of those because we'll be here for a week. But I can tell you we've mapped most of that out and how that actually works and all the important ones. And we're working over smoothing out ones we need to comply with and ones that don't add a lot of benefit to us. Old aircraft within a contemporary airworthiness system. I've said it before, there's some challenges there. We've got old aircraft from rags to jets. Next slide, thanks. Roles of 100 Squadron. I've kind of talked about this before, but I see them as four sort of main things. Preserve and maintain a selection of the RAF heritage aircraft in an airworthy condition. There's no point having aircraft in your squadron that are unairworthy or can't get airworthy. We're here to fly them. And that means that there might be some fleet rebalancing as aircraft become very, very difficult to remain airworthy. So look, that's a moving line of what that'll mean as far as the fleet goes. Safely and effectively conduct aircraft showcase displays. So these are the big displays, things like Avalons, things like Warbirds Down Under, anything that gets on the high profile public events. That is Defence going to the Minister of Defence and saying these things are of value to us and these are the reasons why we want to be in these public facing areas and this is what we get out of it. And so there is a lot of activities we go to that make the HPPE and they become directed tasking for us. And it's all about Air Force public engagement outcomes. That's what that's trying to fulfill, our role out there and into the public facing. And we safely, effectively conduct a bunch of flying displays, handling, aerobatics, static displays that support the PR assets calendar activities and defence ceremonial events, including funeral support and commemorative community events. So we do a lot of fly pass as well. And that's something that the Battle of Britain Memorial Flight do. They do about 1,000 fly pass a year. And multiple count one event as a fly past one location. So they might do multiple in one particular sortie and route. We don't do that many, but you know, I can see one day where we get more linking up of flying over an urban environment. Establish an enduring centre of excellence and sustainably manage Air Force Warbird operations. That's one of our roles. So future plans, I'll touch on that quickly. We want to be an enduring display capability. We've got Air Force's commitment and funding assurance to do that, which is I'm very pleased to announce. We're in multi-year plans of sustainment, and we've argued that, fought for it, and won it. So unless with the change of government things dramatically change on a fiscal front, I hope they don't. But the current plans are in play. They are in the forward estimates, and that means they're funded. Now we're defining a heritage fleet strategy. Now this is a work to occur, but this is going to be our way of articulating what is a maintainable fleet. And that really talks about technical maintenance. There is operational elements in there as well, but you can really read technical airworthiness in there. Usability, and usability is an interesting word. I'm defining that as usability of the roles that we get asked to do. So if I get asked to do fly over the urban CBD, I really would like to put a twin engine aeroplane over there than a single. Sometimes I'll put a single over there, but I'll put a high performance single that can carry with its energy into a spot where it can force land. But putting a low energy aeroplane over there might mean that I'm committing that, should the engine stop, to have a forced landing in a very, very compromising position in the CBD. So you can see that we're balancing out what is usable. Usable might mean reach. It might mean other elements to bring our displays to more far-reaching than just the eastern seaboard of Australia, and also a dimension of risk in there as well, what is in accordance with the tolerated levels of risk. Fleet composition, as you saw from the first slide, we've got pre-World War II aircraft, we've got a flavour of World War II, and really a centrepiece of our fleet around World War II, and rightly so. And a lot of those aircraft are CAC machines, which probably pleases Joe. Would I like to see more in there of CAC or DAP machines? Yes, because I think it tells a wonderful story of our manufacturing capability and design that was in our time of need. And what I'd like to see and tell that story and get it out in the public is that if we're ever called upon that and Australia has its back against the wall, that we've done it before, so we can do it again. It might be changed, but it will be very changed. But and I say that in the advent of different technologies are opening up different manufacturing techniques than what is more traditional that we know, with riveting and metalwork or woodwork way back in the past. And that is the rise of 3D printing and other technology that is rapidly getting brought into that sphere. There is also a wonderful story, and it's probably been mentioned here before, but the female component in our workforce inside CAC and DAP, at that time, it wasn't, the workforce wasn't 25% females in the technical trade in those facilities, but that need meant that had to be filled, and it was filled, and they stepped up to filling it. So there's a wonderful stories through there, and I think our flying fleet of those aircraft show some Aussie ingenuity. Also, to cover a piston versus jet mix. When I say jet there, very easy to run a piston engine and check its performance and keep it maintained. But some of these old jet engines, they're becoming very hard to support and ensure that they've got the right performance in them, and we haven't degraded them over time. So there is some challenges there. So the natural sweet spot, I feel, and that is my personal opinion, is that it's easy to keep piston aircraft flying for longer. And I think we've just got to recognise that some things are more challenging than others. And also technical complexity of the airframe. As we get into more modern than a Canberra bomber and Sabre, we're getting into highly technical aircraft systems. F-111 back in its day had 3,500 people helping maintain it. It's not an aircraft that we can maintain with our workforce like what we've got there, for example. I'd love to see it, but it's not going to happen. Future acquisitions, talked about the Kitty Hawk. I'd love to see DAP Beaufort into our fleet. And I'll probably pose the question out there to the floor, what would you like to see? So, I really would like to hear your answers on that. If people want to put a hand up now, I'll take it.
The CA-15. That's pistol engine.
Beaufighter, yeah. Yeah, that is.
What was that?
Beaufort and Beaufighter.
Beaufort and Beaufighter.
Yeah.
Neptune.
It's a thing about a Beaufort, but there's a couple of people trying to get them flying, but they're not easy.
Yep, yeah, that's right. Look, and you would have probably followed that Haas are working on the Beaufighter right now, and the Hercules engine that's involved there, sleeve valve. Wow, not easy, right? You need some.
The Beaufort, the engines are actually easy.
That's right,
Yeah.
and that's why going after a Beaufort is I believe, I won't say anything's easy, but comparatively easier.
It's one of the few airplanes, the airframes are hard though.
Yeah, absolutely.
Do you have your eye on the Beaufort being slowly built at Caboolture?
Yes. We're in discussions with Ralph Cusack, and I can't announce anything, but we're in discussions. And like all aircraft that are 80% done, 80% to go, the maths doesn't add up, I know, but it feels like there's 80% to go in that aircraft. But I say that in all good humour on that one. So look, we're in discussions.
Glad to hear it.
Interject here. I was in Caboolture on Saturday, and I visited Ralph Cusack, who's quite ill.
Yeah.
I've been associated with that restoration for many years, and I have a particular interest in Beauforts and been involved in the Beaufort Association for many years. I would very much like to see a Beaufort in the fleet in 100 Squadron. I'm taking out to lunch somebody from 100 Squadron next Friday. So I have a big commitment to this area, but the Beaufort restoration, I think, is a big problem.
Yeah.
And should not be taken on lightly.
Yeah.
It could be a bigger problem than anybody really understands.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, look, I've been briefed in. I've spoken at depth with Ralph, and we've had people up there to visit, as you may know. We will go into that with our eyes wide open. I hope that the Commonwealth can bring resources to bear, and that might mean dollars than people, but and see the value of bringing that particular aircraft. It is a fantastic, the fact that 100 Squadron and the link to Beaufort, but what that aircraft did in World War II, I believe, is outstanding work in the Southwest Pacific area. Truly not so much as a torpedo bomber, but as a light bomber. Wow. The story there of its role is I believe, an undertold story. Night bombing, not easy. Hats off to the team there. And 100 Squadron, just to give you an example there, I hope I got my facts right. 29 aircraft lost in those 4 years, 115 aircrew and 6 ground crew. So we're doing it for them. And that's just one squadron, right? A one operational squadron that flew Beauforts. So look, I hear you. I'd love to have a chat with you afterwards. But I welcome any other suggestions. We love hearing people's feedback about that. And I know I'm eating and I've talked a bit longer than probably what I was meant to, but was there anyone online that had more to say about fleet?
Yes, Charles Page.
Hello, Charles.
Yes, you probably know we've got a Beaufort pilot from 100 Squadron living here in Perth. He was 100 on the 20th of March this year. His name's James Burt, and I think he'll be delighted to know you're thinking about obtaining a Beaufort for the Heritage Squadron. So he's a triple centurion because he's 100 in the Air Force's 100th year, and 100 and with a letter from the Queen, and 100 from 100 Squadron. He flew up in New Guinea, 1944 and 45, and got 2 MIDs.
Yeah, thanks for bringing that up, James. Sorry, Charles, about James. I personally have written to James. I will say one thing about our centurions. If they didn't make themselves known to DVA, that didn't get on the list.
No, he's very shy.
Yeah, and it's not a criticism, it's an observation. We now know he's there. Thank you to the people over in the West that brought him to our attention. That was the RAF Air Force Association WA. So we know of him. We have communicated with him. We've sent him a very belated birthday card and well wishes. And we're linking up the other artefacts that need to come to Centurions, which is the full display plaque and coins that get presented to these people because they've earned it.
Thanks, that's appreciated. We've got about 5 centenarians from World War II in Perth. So next month we're having a morning tea party under the Lancaster for all of them. Hopefully they're well enough to come.
Yeah, fantastic initiative. Yeah, great.
Jeff's got a suggestion.
In his future fleet acquisitions, if you've got any of the F-18 classics earmarked to go into the 100 Squadron? Not possible?
Too technical.
Well, the next question is going to be probably impossible. Couldn't you dig up some of those F-111s that you put it, they're in Queensland, and reconstitute one of those?
Look, we'd love to, but I'm sure there's easier ones to find that are above the surface than the ones that are under the surface with lots of things taken off them, by the way.
The troublemakers always sit in the back row,
Always
don't
sit
they?
down the back.
What about C-130?
Well, look, I know Haas can get an Orion flying, so why couldn't we get a C-130? Look, it's a great question. It's not out of the realm of possibility, but it is a challenge. I'll just say that right now. So, but look, I think it actually takes advocates and a bit of noise to be made. So to get a bit of steam behind it. So I'll throw that out there.
So that's a brave wing commander calling ministerials coming his way. Good on you.
Probably there, sir. And I'll just throw them the history and heritage branch and say you can answer them there, sir.
Mate, we'll teach you how to write. You'll be okay.
So look, we just go to the next 2 slides. I just wanted to show the last page because
Did that move?
oh no,
No, you need to get active again.
Yeah. Oh, I've done it. Have I?
and one more. Yeah, that's the kind of mission done slide. Walking away from the 100 Squadron Beauforts.
I'll thank Phil before we wrap up.
Look, I'll open to any other questions. Yeah.
So can I, just before we jump into questions, can I thank Phil very much for the talk? And what we'll do now is, yes, we'll jump into questions, but I have to take the microphone to the questioner so people online can hear you.
Apologies.
Under the current structure right now today with 100 Squadron, how much of the Point Cook infrastructure, you spoke about the Northern Bellmans, what about the Southern Bellmans? Any news on those?
Yeah, so the Southern Bellmans are earmarked for demolition.
No,
the ones closest to the coast.
they're going to be rebuilt.
No, they're going to be demolished because they're unsafe and they've basically been corroded away. There's not a whole lot of that that's holding them up at the moment. So the southern Bellmans are in really, really bad shape. And what you'll find around Point Cook, the coastal band, is that anything closer to the coast really, really, really does cop it. You can be a couple hundred metres away from the coast and it's quite a different story.
I'm well aware of that because I worked in them for 14 years.
Yeah. Yeah.
But how does that fit into heritage? Do they get rebuilt?
So Point Cook has a heritage plan and it has heritage precincts. Air Force is not obliged to keep every Bellman. It has to keep an amount of Bellmans, and it has, and it will continue to.
This is going to totally change the look of that site, especially from photos and things. And
So it's not really in your scope of things.
And it's not. I look after the infrastructure that I've got allocated to me, and at the moment I have 2.5 Bellmans allocated to me. And I go, oh, half a Bellman, that's awesome. But I share that with the RAF Museum and we get along very well on it. But and the future, if the RAF Museum actually does move, and I, again, please advocate for it. If it does move to the northwest corner of RAF Base Point Cook, then I inherit another 2 Bellmans, and 100 Squadrons Precinct actually grows into the current northernmost display hangars of the RAF Museum as well. That's a good day for 100 Squadron because I got 4 hangars.
And they've already been tidied up for you beforehand.
Well, they're in a much nicer state.
Question here.
I've got a hang on.
With the microphone.
I've got a question on behalf of Noel Jackling, who wanted to ask a historical question. Did 100 Squadron take part in the Battle of the Java Sea? So that would have been back in about March of 42, and considering that 100 Squadron was formed in February,
yeah,
is that enough time, or did it not happen?
No, it didn't. I'm pretty sure I'd have to go back to my source, the Song of the Beaufort book, but I don't believe so.
Okay, thank you.
The Battle of Bismarck, definitely. Yeah. So there is some classic named areas, and there's a lot of work that they did, which just comes into the Southwest Pacific area or other ops around the northern perimeters of Australia that, you know, don't have a named battle, if you like, specifically.
Roland, go ahead.
You've inherited 2 separate engineering organisations maintaining a diverse fleet of aeroplanes. Part 1, are you intending to train people to handle that diversity for 100 Squadron, within 100 Squadron, or are you going to rely largely on external contract work? Because you've got so many different engines, for instance.
Yeah.
Airframes are not so bad. You can bash a bit of tin into anything, but the actual engines and propellers and things like that.
A few framies that might disagree with you, but yeah, I know what you're saying. Look, it's a great question. I think it's there's a combination of all of these things. We very much have industry partners. And I'll say in the Melbourne area, we just don't do it all on our own. Inside our Car 30 organisation, we recognise General Aviation Maintenance, GAM, at Essendon, and also the old aeroplane company at Tyab, under Judy and Bernie over there.
You shoot Jonesy and you're okay.
Yeah, no, we need to clone Jonesy, right? No, look, I currently have some of my junior workforce right now where we're progressing them to a LAME standard, and we're giving, and going after certain niche capabilities of what that can bring to their on their ticket. So whether that's fabric, wood, engines, all of those particularly unique things. I see some of the engines are very interesting in that we are lucky that there is organisations that build one for rebuild and overhaul engines in other parts of the world as well as in Australia. But we know it is if we're not careful, a dwindling effort. As this gets a smaller and smaller crowd, there is a critical point there of where it is sustainable or not. We realise that there is areas, if I looked at the Temora maintenance team, it is quite a young workforce. I look at Haas, and it's not a criticism, just an observation. At the other end of the scale, and we need to pass the baton on, otherwise it will resolve itself, unfortunately.
Question from down back.
Yep, just here. Thank you, sir. Just on Temora, my early understanding of the arrangement was that that was a kind of a lease arrangement with the Air Force. Would that be correct? And that was for a period of time. Has that been extended, or is it an ongoing lease arrangement, given that you're an ongoing squadron?
Yes.
It's not just for the centenary year.
So I guess might substitute the word lease with rolling wave contract.
Okay.
And that's probably the way I describe that.
Yeah.
So we were lucky enough that when Defence acquired the aircraft for the big sum total of one of those sort of notes that you can put in your pocket that has a 1 in it that doesn't get made anymore, for $1, then we are the aircraft owner. So there's no lease payment per se because we are the owner. Well, we like to see ourselves as the custodians because the Commonwealth own them, right? But on paper, as a commanding officer of 100 Squadron, in the eyes of CASA and the Defence Insurance Office, I'm seen as the aircraft owner. Someone's got to own them right on an inventory. Pretty chuffed to own a couple of Spitfires, and well, it's only a Beaufort, wow. Pinch myself. However, so there is costs involved and an arrangement in place and a contract in place to secure the services of the engineering workshop, of which I am the Commonwealth representative for that contract. So I look after its ongoing requirements and maintenance oversight of it, and contract assurance for that particular contract. It's a great question. So it's full disclosure. There is money changing hands to buy services that support warbirds up in Temora, and we have our requirement like any other owner of any material, and we pay the bill for Point Cook completely with workforce because they are defence employees, whereas Temora is a contract for that service.
Thanks, Phil. There's a question online from Roderick.
Hello, Roderick.
But I think three of us have asked the same. What's the relationship with Haas? Is it gentlemen's agreements, cooperation, and in particular to avoid overlap of the collections or complement each other? Obviously, they're a major player too, but not under your umbrella.
Yeah, look, great question. I deal with the fleet that I've got on my plate. There is relationships and agreements with Haas because, as you can well imagine, with an organisation of aircraft, that a lot of them have flown in the Royal Australian Air Force, as we went to retiring certain amounts of aircraft and product, there was, I guess, deals done with that. And therefore, there is a relationship and a provision of some services or event participation. That is not in my lane of effort. I have a relationship. I have visited, I have welcomed Terry Delahunty and his team to Point Cook, and I've been welcomed when we were at Wings over Illawarra into their shed. And I made the mistake of walking in at about 8 o'clock in the evening, and I didn't walk out till in the wee hours the next day because it's fascinating. So look, we have a great relationship with them, but it is less about fleet composition and overlap, as probably the question you raised there, Roderick. I think that might be one of those challenges. Would I like to see a Catalina in the fleet? No one raised Catalina, probably not from maritime backgrounds. I think what the Catalina did in the Southwest Pacific is just incredible, especially our black cats. But you know, they have a wonderful specimen, and I'm so glad that someone is flying and displaying that aircraft, because it is a wonderful machine. Would that mean that we didn't necessarily get a Catalina in the future? Possibly. I think there is some consideration of, well, if they've got one, why would we have one?
Same with the DC-3 then. They've got one and you don't.
Well, they've got several.
Yeah. Yeah.
Look, as I said before, twin engine aircraft are a growing piece of trade in the 100 Squadron, because they have an ability to safely conduct, as the Lancaster does, over London and many urban areas in England. The same thing happens here when I get asked to put unique aircraft on and I get to choose the aircraft. I'm rushing away for a twin engine in many cases. So I'd love to see more twins in our fleet, of ones that we can manage, usable, maintainable.
Would you choose a caribou?
What about a goody bird?
Look, it's very much in that possibility. Yeah. You all know that. Sorry, to someone online.
Or caribou. That's another.
Yeah, definitely. C-47 Caribou is. I won't say they're coming tomorrow, but there are aircraft that. Yeah.
Any more questions in the room or online?
Under your structure, does it cover the static displays of point group as well, or just a flying? Sorry.
The question was, does it cover the flying and static? It's just the flying side.
Yeah, just the airworthy aircraft. Now, I do note that aircraft might transition as they age and get less airworthy out of being a flyer into a static. The way I probably look at that as a capability life cycle example, cradle to grave. Well, an airworthy aircraft in our case doesn't really have a grave. It goes on static display. So I think we nest very much with in a history and heritage, that we would hand over the aircraft to history and heritage and go, we're kind of done with it. We offer it to you or back to the Commonwealth, another area of Commonwealth, and go, sorry, apologies, where would you like that aircraft to go? And we can get it over there for its last time, or it's on a truck, either way. But yes, 100 Squadron, History and Heritage Branch have that line of responsibility of all of the gate guard aircraft, the static aircraft, aircraft in collections, aircraft in heritage centres, aircraft in the RAF Museum. That's all History and Heritage Branch. And I think that's wonderful that we've got one organisation running that as far as the statics go.
And Phil, perhaps add there, we also look after aircraft that are gifted / loaned to some civilian museums as well, like the F-111s that we can't give to them. They're put there, but we still own them.
Yeah. TARS restrictions and whatever other restrictions are in place.
Yep.
So going forward, something I see is pretty important, which I've been involved in the past with having a heavy background in Mackies and CD4s. I was involved in getting the first ones on the register and pushing back then. I had CASA convinced to get Mackies flying, but unfortunately the museum side wasn't so fruitful. But there was a plan, and CASA was convinced because they gave me full maintenance authority. That was the hard part. We actually got the hard part out of the way. We got the pilots and getting them flying. That's another story. And but being involved on that side of it, knowing there's the product, The easy part is getting it flying. The hard part is keeping it flying.
Yeah, absolutely.
Now, how involved are you going to be with future products that do become available? I'll give an example. One that I think would be easy to keep flying for me as a layman and a pilot of some sort is PC9. Knowing it's a very common product, PD6 wise, the hard part, it's the expensive part, but also one you get a lot of hours out of. That would be feasible. How involved will you be as these products become available and the plan to look at something like that and what's involved logistically and getting it going?
Look, we're in any of our new acquisitions or ones that we're proposing, we have to be intimately involved in it. I think, interesting enough, with PC9, we didn't keep one in our collection and identify it to go airworthy.
That's what we love.
So it's one of those ones that if they're going to retire PC21 in 5 years, we'll take one of them. I'm joking, but look, I think what we would face is, and I know the progress of PC9's out there now. I'm following that closely, and they're close. They're close to getting them up in the air. It's a different world that they're putting it up in. So when you mentioned one thing before, the difference of operating a civilian limited category aircraft in a non-company structure is that you're a private individual accepting all of the risk of operating the frame on yourself. What CASA and AWOL are concerned about, and I won't say exclusively and only, but it is the safe operation over the third-party population and the other airspace users. There's a big difference there between what a person takes on and what a company or commonwealth takes on. Now, I am incredibly well versed in the WHS Act, unfortunately, as a commander and in this operation. And I take that responsibility incredibly seriously because, unfortunately, what that tool is a legislative instrument of making someone accountable. So that's the cold, hard, black letter legislative law that we have to be very cognizant of. It doesn't make us risk averse, it just makes us very aware of our duty of care and our obligations. So I'll just say, as the dimension you mentioned, it's easy. Everything you've mentioned is a non-ejection seat aircraft. They're cold seats. When the Commonwealth flew them, what did we have? They were live seats.
Yeah, that's why any involvement I've had in that, that's the first compliancy hurdle, which I think is easy, is why deviate? And like with the CD4s, that's the first thing I did was we just ripped the Air Force letterhead off the top and just ran completely with the Air Force system.
Yeah,
and it went straight through.
Yeah.
So that's my advice to anybody.
Absolutely,
that's right. And you're convincing CASA, you're saying, well, we're not going to operate it any differently than what the Air Force did. And straight away you take on board their compliancy and run with that. And that's what I did with the Mackie, and with a couple other diversions to make it even better. And that's the whole thing about it too, is you haven't just got your product, you got your continuous improvement that goes with that. And then those mod books are pretty big at the end of it. So
absolutely. Yeah.
Phil, if I may, I can probably add something there that's a new dimension when we start talking about aircraft that are modern, like the PC9 is. Even for us to try to keep the manuals, just a couple of the maintenance manuals from Pilatus to look after our static aircraft, Pilatus wanted us to basically establish a license, and then we would have to pay them for use of those maintenance manuals, even just one or two. So you can't just photocopy them. And if you go into a flying environment, you need all of those manuals. So we would have to be paying a large amount of money to Pilatus just to be able to keep those manuals. So unlike in the aircraft you're flying now, the Mustangs, etc., You know, there's collections of manuals and there's all this sort of stuff. Today, the modern OEMs regard the manuals as being intrinsic to their IP and their money making as they do the aircraft. So, you know, there's just not getting the aircraft and saying, right, we've still got the manuals. Once we got rid of those aircraft, we had to get rid of the manuals as well. We weren't allowed to keep them.
So there is challenges, and I guess that word maintainability, when you dig deeper into all of what that definition is, and that's just my word over the top, right? But I'm adding more meaning to it probably in the depth of it. When you scratch the surface there, you see some of the complexity and challenges. Some of it is, I believe, insurmountable, and some of it is achievable. It's just, how many things do you want to make your life more complex? I already have some challenges in our fleet already, and it will naturally balance itself despite our best efforts, because we come up against harder and harder complexities that we just can't find a way around without going in and re-engineering something, maybe. So look, I think there's some challenges behind the scenes. Part of disposals in the future will always be looking at what is in the art of the possible. But as the machinery gets way more complex and it has its life, I see there's some challenges there. However, I'll make an example, and you're probably aware of it. There is people building new build Spitfires. There is people building new build Mustangs, and there is people building new build Kitty Hawks, and in this country. So, you know, it is possible they might not have the provenance, but they have the replication and repeatability way into the future, if we're allowed to keep flying piston engine aircraft into the future, because it's not some sort of environmental issue.
No, we'll get green fuel.
Green fuel, yeah. So look, I don't say that to be political there, but look, it's just some of those little pieces of the puzzle.
Can I suggest that we finish up? Yeah. Phil is going to be with us over a cuppa, and again, thank you for all of the fascinating. I mean, the background to, as you say, standing up a squadron and then performing all of those air shows and then the catch-up air shows in 2022 has been an amazing story, and it's terrific. You know, certainly as all of us as taxpayers, we're getting good value, and we appreciate your stewardship there as well. So round of applause for Phil.